Good morning, everybody. As John said, this is part of the Changing World talking series of ULI. And what we're going to do is talk about some exciting things like innovation, technology, social connection, because what we do know is this world is moving fast, and it's changing very fast, and we have to change our thinking to stay really with it and be successful. So this morning we have 4 very different, what I'm going to call provocateurs, to talk with us. They're also visionaries, and they're going to share their thoughts about how to get us out of our box, our personal box, our business box, and how to think differently. But as different as they are, they have a lot in common. First of all, they do not see things as problems. They see things as challenges that need a solution. They look at problems differently, and they actually value a different way to think about them. They think simple ideas are just as good as complex solutions, and they believe that a problem can actually be a solution. The other thing is they are leaders. They're not followers. They're doers, in addition to talking, and they believe in being responsible for what they take on. And what I like most about them in the real estate context is they do not see their environment ever as a limitation to what they want to accomplish. So we have, again, representing the corporate world, we're going to have Russ Conser. Representing what I call the people as our renegade gardener, Ron Finley. We have Gabe Klein representing the public sector, and most importantly, our host city, Chicago. And we have Elton Rivas representing the entrepreneurs and really the social media context around crowdfunding. Let me start and ask Russ maybe, the small pond concept. How do we think about crowdfunding? Is that a small pond? Is that a big ocean? If you're putting that on your S-curve, what's going on there?
Probably at multiple levels. I think crowdfunding is one of these things that's been bubbling for the last, say, 5 years or so. And there's been several models, some in philanthropic space, Kiva, Kickstarter, and this space. And this, my impression was that Elton and his team are maybe the George Mitchell of crowdfunding, in energy, the people that are pulling together the DNA. Because I think from my conversations with these people, when I see the different ponds in crowdfunding, each one of these little startups and concepts being a pond in its own right, they get feedback that it's really positive, but everyone knows it doesn't quite work. And there was certainly something building in that system saying that you have to get back to the real world where real people interact frequently. It's intrinsically local and human. It's not, the virtual stuff can be a tool maybe as opposed to the entire platform. And so what I see here is an example of a successful species that could replicate and go to Washington. And you live in that world, but once you get local, people feel ownership, they can interact quicker, and then that evolutionary replication process can just take off, right? So, I think it is a good example, and maybe it's a bit of a tangent, but I think one of the things that we're starting to realize with these tools given to us by information technology and connectivity is one of the things I really, Ron mentioned that the LA City Council just made it legal to plant a garden in your parkway here a couple of weeks ago. Ron could have argued and gone to every city council meeting for a long time to get that to happen, or Ron could just go out and do it, right? And I think it's the doing it that platforms like this enable that will allow millions of little ponds to get started, and the good ones will take off. And I think once the people start demanding that, whether through commercial things or through political participation, it happens more. Maybe it's a bit naive, but that's how it feels to me.
Well, people are tired of waiting for the government.
Yeah. Yeah, well, if I look at, Ron, it was 15 people on that city council, and it took 2 years.
Well, but in annals of government, that was a short amount of time, to make something like that happen.
But in your analogy, 2 years and you say 13 years to get a transport project done, your child example, they've gotten old. Okay? I mean, you said that was your catalyst. So, I mean, how do we, this is speed and fast, you know, how do we connect that, how do we change that?
Just what reality? He said, we do. Stop following the status quo is not working. Let's change it. And the way we change the status quo is we change it. Stop, you know, it's like I tell people, I said, oh, your ass know how to Twitter, but you can't use the shovel. You know what I'm saying? We have to start, we have to become people that do like we used to do. To make, you want to move the truck, you move it. You know, and that's what happens. Everybody's doing everything online and on this, and it's not physical. So now what is this? We have this thing with infobesity, you know, where you
infobesity, I love it.
Where it's, you know, the overconsumption of useless ass information, you know. You know, and so no, I just, my thing is, it's like, no, I don't want to hear it. I'm not dancing your dance. I'm not playing in your band. This needs to be done. Let's just do it.
But you had to take personal risk. You broke the law.
So I still got these holes in my hand.
You know? You said, you know, someone in government that actually tries to change something, the risk is they're not there.
Oh, yeah. The risk is definitely that you will lose your job at some point. Either when there's a new administration that comes in that doesn't understand what you were trying to do, your personality may be too big. I mean, one of the things that I tried to do in DC and here is to actually market our services, you know, explain to people why we're doing what we're doing, how it benefits them, get out there and be the face for the mayor, and actually not just make the change, but make the change with outreach and understanding, because otherwise it's temporary change. And I think that's probably, and I learned that in the private sector, like if you want to sell a product or a service, you have to have a feature and advantage and benefit, and you have to get it across to people. But not everybody understands that in government, and they're like, who is this guy and what is he doing, right? But it's not about me, it's not about my ego, it's about like, the Divvy program won't be successful if we don't tell people how to use it and how it works. But I think, you know, there's a common theme here today, which is you can't just wait for things to happen, you can't wait for the government to get something done. I mean, I happen to be in the government out of frustration with the government, and I think that I've been able to show people that you can get things done quickly at a private sector pace. But what, you know, Ron's doing, or what you're doing with crowdfunding, or in the energy industry, I mean, basically, there's so much disruption going on. All the old rules are out the window, and that's such a healthy thing. And it scares a lot of people who are old school or who have been doing things the same way and they don't understand. But we just have to, like, either you're either driving the bus or you're under the bus at this point. And I'd rather be driving the bus.
And Elton, you know, you flashed up your resume. You know, you've done a lot of things and a lot of jobs. Your generation is not afraid of changing. And yet we've got this dichotomy where we're run right now by people that are afraid of change, and the younger, how do we get the younger generation to help us through the transition?
You know, I fall right on the Gen X, Gen Y line, so I've you know, been blessed with this.
Does that mean you pick which day you want to be?
Yeah, understanding of both worlds, if you will, but I don't think it's any different. Like, we talk about the rules changing, we talk about all these different things. I'm a huge history fan, and it's all the same stuff. We just have tools at our fingertips now that we didn't have before. And, you know, whether it's a shovel or a Twitter account, you still got to move forward. But to connect with, you know, if you will, like, we get a lot of people that say, oh, well, how do you connect with the old guard in Jacksonville? Or how do you connect with different things? It's the same thing you would do to connect with the younger generation. You have a great idea. You've got a really valid, meaningful why, like why you're doing whatever you're doing, because that's what people care about. Right. And then you just start. Like, it's not that hard to connect. I think the hard part of connecting isn't generational. It's more so personality-wise. right? Yeah. And generational is usually like people perceive that the old guard is risk adverse, stodgy, set in the ways. That's not the reality. I think the reality is that people just need to connect with like-minded visionaries and activist doers. And if you do that, then you can, have a great cup of coffee with somebody and maybe they go to sleep a little bit earlier than you do, but hey, who cares? Like, you're still doing something in your community.
Well, Ron, what you were describing with too much information, we've sort of gone up Maslow's curve where we're in this intellect, but we've lost the basics of food and safety and those kind of things. I mean, it's kind of success has already brought us back to a primitive level.
Yeah, it's nothing new. I mean, it's not new, it's ancient. To me, garden should be like, so what? Look at it should be like air. We shouldn't even think about it. Nobody thinks about air, and it's the most important thing to your life. But who literally thinks about every morning, oh, air is, nobody does that. And air should get that kind of celebration, but it doesn't. So it's ancient. I mean, you put a seed in the ground. That's what we do, aren't we? Everybody here is a gardener. You remember that? Hey, the garden, the guy said, hey, watch my garden. And, back, way back,
garden
the fig leaf and all that stuff. The thing, the girl.
Now, you've been on TED Talks. We won't take that conversation. You've been on TED Talks, and you said you're going to do TED Talks again in Vancouver.
No, well, I'm doing TED Youth in New Orleans. Then I'm going back to TED in Vancouver. Yeah.
Is what you're doing going to other cities?
Oh my God, what I'm doing is going around the world. I just got back from Doha, Qatar. I'm, from Canada, from Calgary to Greece. I've been since March. I'm going, where am I going? To Muscat in the Middle East next week.
So this problem of food and all of this is a world.
Yeah, people are not dying from starvation. They're dying from abundance. They're dying from too much unfood, though. It's not real food, but these corporations have managed to, terrorize the whole world with this horrible food. And it's causing, places like Saudi Arabia is a food desert now because of, the kind of foods that they're eating, the diabetes and all that's up. So yeah, it's around the world. I mean, I had this gentleman from India, he Facebooked me, and he sent me pictures of his kids because his kids are now calling themselves gangster gardeners, and they're getting other gangsters in the neighborhood to start gardening in India. So I'm like, some of the letters and some of the the emails, I mean, they like literally bring you to tears that something so simple has gotten away from us, that putting a seed in the ground is now this magical, oh my God, it's just.
But is it people or is it cities? I mean, Chicago's known as having the most beautiful cityscape possible with flowers and landscaping, but that's
and
not
food deserts.
And food deserts.
Oh, so huge food deserts.
Are cities engaging in this
yeah. I mean, our mayor is.
Is it against the law? There's still more air in the room.
Yeah, losing.
People have their views, but our mayor is very focused on food deserts, and he's introduced major change, particularly in the south side of the city, whether it's supporting the aquaponic gardens where you have the fish feeding the food and the food being produced locally. Community gardens. Actually, our agency, we did an urban ag program this summer where we had 600 kids, kids from rough neighborhoods, and we put them through 6 weeks of urban ag and bike mechanics, and then we gave 2/3 of them a bike if they showed up regularly. So there's all kinds of innovative programs going on. The mayor's also brought in, Walgreens, which are smaller format drugstores, but they have to have fresh foods. So you go in there, they have apples, bananas, lettuce, all that stuff. So there's a lot that's going on in Chicago from the government, but also, private sector, startups. There are mobile vans selling organic foods on the South Side, all kinds of stuff.
And Russ, in the corporate world, do you think that seeing this dynamic, is innovation looking at that, or is it very much just focused on?
I think it's still very early for innovation in the corporate pond, if you will, because the way I agree with Ron. I think we got here because corporations figured out how to break problems down into pieces and then solve pieces. So we thought nutrition was about carbs, fat, and protein, or something, and so then corporations solved that bit of the puzzle, not realizing that all the time we were disconnecting the people from real food and an understanding of how all those pieces fit together. One of the most important things that Ron is preaching that I hope corporations listen to and citizens listen to is gardening. I truly agree is a gateway practice. That is that I think it's probably the single thing that anyone can do right away, right where they are, that starts to develop a relearning in humanity that everything is connected to everything else, right? So people are going to get healthier. Ron said communities are going to get healthier. I think businesses that start, when Ron came up, he said, nature doesn't have waste. Well, industry did because we broke it down into pieces, and at some point there was something that went out the end. But I think we'll learn from gardening in ways that, when our businesses and cities start, using terms like cultivating and, natural metaphors for things instead of machinery. And I think gardening's right there. So I think it's still a long ways off in the corporate world. For what it's worth, if I just take a biological further thing here, I think crowdfunding, corporations came into being because you needed to scale things up big. Once we figure out how to scale things big with little tiny pieces all doing their own things, I think it's going to be harder to be a corporation, frankly, in the long run, and maybe that's for the health of all of us. But anyhow, I think learning about the symbiosis really is the word that I used, but I'm sure there's a more colorful way to state it. But these people have to relearn how things are related to one another, and I think if we get that part right, we'll get innovation right, our cities will be healthy, our businesses will be healthy, whatever their scale. And that's where it has to start.
I think, this delusion about there not being enough food, and there's all these billions of people, and we need to grow this, and you can't feed yourself. I think that's some bull, because like now it was 40, but now they're saying 50% of the food is being thrown away. So if that's the truth, that means you need to uplift your game. Your game needs to change, and you need to get your distribution systems better to get this food to the people that need this food. And this misnomer about fresh food. Yeah, it's fresh, but where the hell did it come from? What was it sprayed with? It still can be called fresh. It's one of those words like natural, which is basically a joke. It's still sprayed, genetically modified, and everything else is happening to this food. So our food should not harm us. And that's what's happening right now.
But the other thing in seeing your pictures, you took a pretty barren landscape and turned it into
a jungle.
No, a gorgeous, lush place versus what it was before.
Yeah,
so
food for us.
There's a lot more that can be done than just thinking about it as food. It can be thought of in the context.
Well, you have to. That's what I'm saying. You create an ecosystem. All of a sudden, you wonder, where the hell were these hummingbirds? Why? It's like they were sitting on the fence waiting for you to plant. When the hell is he gonna plant this garden? Or all of a sudden you got butterflies and pollinators and bees. I mean, I got bees that just took over a trash can, and they've been there for 2 years. And they like, hey, we only have to go like 25 feet, and we good. So it's like. Why y'all laughing? And so the roots, just like a tree, and like people know what's above is below. People don't realize that branches are nothing but roots, literally, because if you lay a branch down on the ground, it will get roots, and vice versa. So we just have to get, I mean, I don't know, it's just so simple, but so amazing at the same time, like with compost, that you can have compost, all of a sudden you take this green leaf and this brown leaf and you put them together and you got 150 degrees. If it was dead, and that's what it made, that's what compost made me realize, nothing dies. You know, because if it was dead, where'd this energy come from? How did it heat up to 150 degrees? And then what does it do? It gives you the best nutrients and the best soil, black gold, that you can possibly get for the plant.
Reincarnation.
Yeah, there you go. So no, we need to get back to these simple systems. Adobe houses, you know.
Don't tell that audience, no. They're trying to build beautiful projects. But no, one of the things that ULI is very focused on is building healthy places, starting at all the aspects of a city and how a project can fit into that. You know, so if you were to sort of, you know, be able to give them each a message of how to deal with the different parts of the segments that you all deal with, what would you tell them that, you know, how can they really make a difference as they're trying to think about that?
I mean, from my standpoint, just like Ron's passionate about food, I'm passionate about people moving. You know, there's just, we're so focused on how deluxe our cars are, and, you know, we get on our jets and this and that, but the original transportation was our feet, and then bikes and mass transit. And I think we've got to get back to our roots on that too, because obesity is a combination of eating really crappy food and then sitting on your butt all day and not doing anything. And I think like there are new applications like Moves where, you know, automatically every morning it tells me how much I biked, how much I rode the bus, how much I walked yesterday. And I think that's the future, is changing people's behavior, and how do we incentivize that? And there's a lot of different ways you can do it with technology. And what's great about transportation is technology is crucial, like our bike share system, solar powered, and there's open data, it uses GPS technology, and there's a lot of apps. But at the end of the day, it's a bike and a station. And we need more of that on the ground. And the other nice thing about it is it's really social equity. I mean, you can ride for 20 cents a day year round if you have a coat. And in some ways, it's even cheaper than walking, because if you walk every day, you're going to have to buy a lot of new shoes. So I think we need to get back to active transportation.
Well, I think trying to connect some of these things together here, not only should our cities have gardens in them, but when we integrate symbiotically energy resources and systems into our cities, you know, they're going to be the best metaphor for a tomato garden. Really, I mean, they're going to have all these interdependencies, and they're enabled by IT, but using the stuff from crowdfunding, they're not about IT. It's ultimately about riding the bike. And you know, I was really impressed when I came into town this week and saw the bike lanes. We lived in the Netherlands for 3 years, and of course, that's got the best bike transportation system in the world, but it was designed in. It was built in, and that made the difference. Whereas cities like mine didn't think about it symbiotically, and that's why people are afraid of bike lanes, right? They painted little narrow lanes on the side just to increase your chances of getting killed, I guess. I don't know. And so I think as I try to connect these things together, there's something in here about figuring out all these interdependencies, using the information technology to help enable the connections, but then, you know, I like your point of congestion is a good thing. Let's get our cities closer together, get them buzzing with events. They don't have to be the same all the time. And then from my perspective, you know, the energy systems that come into them can be a part of them, and it can, I honestly think when we get this right, when we come with new city DNA out, you know, within the next decade or next couple decades, however it works, we're going to find, you know, it's like a new renaissance. It's a new enlightenment or something that we'll find that we're much more productive when we're integrating and working together than we try to fight in isolation, whether that's equivalent of moving to the suburbs to avoid crime or whatever, staying in cars instead of bikes. I think we'll find accelerated productivity in cities, happiness, health, all that stuff. And by the way, I think it's going to start with health. So I think that these are great places to start. And that's going to teach us a lot of things that we need to do how to figure everything else. I just funded a Kickstarter last week that's got a nice little device that'll go in my house for energy management. So, you know, play the game, learn. It's all about the ponds. Don't expect any of them to really take over. But I think this space is going to change. So
you think we're on sort of an S curve?
Oh, I see so many experiments where you know, take everything that's talked about here today, and you can see those little exponential curves. I know I'm kind of the mathematical geeky guy that takes these things analytically, but every one of those things has little curves that are saying they're too small to notice on a national scale, but they're transforming neighborhoods.
But you just made a great point, though, a minute ago, which is that the whole conversation we've had today is about energy, whether it's the energy that Ron's talking about in the compost with the 2 leaves, or the energy of the streets in Jacksonville when you activate the streets, or actual energy. It's all about creating the connections to make that energy. It's really all the same energy.
Yeah, and which is what we are.
Exactly.
Bacteria and energy. If everybody forget, we decompose just like that leaf does. You know.
So you got one chance to give these guys some really good advice. Not that you haven't already, but.
Well, I mean, the only advice what's funny with me with this LEED certified stuff and this whole energy thing, where a lot of this stuff goes to the rich folks. It doesn't go really where it should. The people that can afford to pay, you know, for their power. They're the ones that need solar power. You know, why don't we have the projects, the roofs on the projects with green roofs? Why don't we have the roofs on the projects with solar spaces? These rich ass people with their, you know, Teslas, they don't need, you know, they can pay for that. So I mean, I don't know how do we change that, shift that, you know? But I mean,
there's some good ponds going on in that.
Right?
Yeah, I'm aware of some ponds.
Yeah, okay,
there's some really cool stuff going on there.
But no, I mean, the advice I can give everybody is like that's the last thing I said. Let's just plant some shit, you know, and grow this place and green this place and make everybody should get a chance at brilliance. Everybody should let their brilliance show. Everybody should be engaged in art, because that's what this all is. Everything is art, you know. But we've gotten away from that. Gardening is art. What we're doing, this conversation that we're having, this is art. You know, this stage, it's all art, but we don't see it. Like these buildings and these cities and these parks that these people design is art, you know. Let's just do art. That's what that's the advice I give. Do some badass art, you know.
And Elton, how about you?
I always get stuck with the last thing, and it, you know, should be smart.
Right.
I guess just listening to everything, I would argue that, well, energy may be some sort of, you know, connected node today, and can't argue at all with art and creativity not being that. I think ego matters. I think that the biggest thing that we went into OneSpark with ultimately was to help change the ego within our community. We had a brief conversation backstage about TED and TEDx and, you know, different talks and conferences and events and all that stuff that's out there. And now, personally, I feel like we've been in this world over the past decade or so of thinking and of talking about thinking and of thinking about talking about thinking. And that continues to go on. And for us, the biggest thing, I think, for our generation is we all want to work on something that matters and has, you know, a passion and a why and a reason that we're doing what we're doing. But OneSpark ultimately helped to be a catalyst for changing our community's ego. And since then, we've seen dozens of different things happen. And mind you, this isn't like a probably 8-month period of time after the event, right? It just happened in April this past year. But we've seen dozens of new programming pop up in the city. We've seen new discussions from developers about investments that weren't there before. The news media, which you can never tell them to say exactly what you want them to say and have them actually say it, is starting to say positive things about the community. We're seeing students get engaged, and this is like K through 12 up to higher ed and continuing education with our military, you know, families that are in Jacksonville that are saying, hey, I can do something here in this community. So the biggest thing I would say is, you know, any project, any passion, any development, shit, anything that you're involved in, make sure you think about the impact on ego within the community that you're doing it in, because it's got to be one that's positive, and if it's not, just please don't do it.
Yes.
Can I say something?
You can.
What I don't like about conferences is conferences.
Yep.
Y'all don't, they just talk. Why don't we all, it's like, what is it, a couple of thousand people? How many people were at this conference? What about if one day of one of these conferences that happen around the world, what about if everybody collectively go out together and just do some shit together? I mean, just, and really make an impact instead of just hearing all these brilliant people talk and, you know. I think it should be the conference where we do some shit. Maybe that's the new, maybe that's the crowdfunding.
Come on down to One Spark, man. There's 1,000 people there that are just doing some shit. I mean, the whole purpose of that event is to get ideas connected to the resources they need to make them happen. Like, that's our mission. It's not to bring in the most amazing speakers, and sure, we've got people to provoke thought, but it's all about just getting people that are there that were maybe too afraid to step out in the public eye.
They don't know what to do.
They didn't know what to do. They don't have a pathway. And saying, forget all that stuff. Like, this has to be about activating doers. And
but that's the other theme here today, besides energy, is like getting shit done. And I, ironically, so we have this building a new Chicago theme for all of our projects around the city. And in my office, I have the same sign, but it says getting shit done instead. Because that's really all that matters. Like, if you just plan and talk and plan and, you know, you don't put stuff in the ground.
But ain't that what academics do?
Huh?
Ain't that what academics do? Just talk about doing shit rather than
agree. That's
doing it.
That's why I never went to grad school. I was more interested in going out and doing stuff.
Right.
And you know, I think that's the other theme amongst the people up here is we want to make things happen, and everybody can make things happen.
Well, I started this by saying that they were very different, but I told you they were actually very much the same, and I think they've definitely proven that. I said they don't see things as problems, but challenges which they need to solve. Definitely, actually I said they look at problems differently or like to differently, but actually I think you're pretty much on the same page there, but definitely I said they're doers. And just so you know, this is an audience of doers that have changed the landscape across the country, and the reason we do this is so that they get ideas to do more. So we invite you to the concurrent sessions. You can have a much more person-to-person conversation with our guests and provocateurs because they want you to do a lot more, obviously, after you've heard what has happened at this session. So thank you.